Hello, fellow flamenco enthusiasts, and welcome to Everything Flamenco. I'm your host, La Jugo. This is episode 55. Last week, I said I didn't know what I was going to talk about because I wasn't sure about if I'm going to do this topic or not. I'm still not sure if this is the right one, but today we are finally going to talk about the complicated history of flamenco. Most flamenco podcasts would probably start with the origins as their first episode or one of their first. And as you know, I try to honor the art form as much as possible and therefore have been quite hesitant and still am to do an episode on this topic. For one thing, flamenco is a reflection of centuries of history and culture, and oftentimes deep pain and sorrow and many years of hardships. And how do you show respect for that if it's not your history and your culture? The other thing is that the origins of flamenco are quite mysterious, and especially in the beginning, there are not many records of it. It wasn't even called flamenco when it started. So traditions were transferred by families and stories, not on paper. So even with the huge amount of research that has gone into this episode, I might still be wrong in the eyes of some, but I'm still going to give it a go. And hopefully we will all still learn a little something about this dance form that we love so much. So let's talk the complicated history of flamenco. Okay, so let's get into it. One of the most fascinating things about flamenco is that no one can really say where it began. It wasn't created on a single day or by a single person. It grew slowly, shaped by centuries of migration, survival, and cultural mixing. Most historians agree that flamenco's roots lie in the southern region of Spain, as we all know, Andalusia, but its story starts much further away. Around 1,500 years ago, the Romani people, often referred to as gypsies, and we have kind of tried to clarify that. Just go back to episode 50, where we spoke about Freedom Day and the Gypsies' exile. There, I give a little bit of a clarification of the term gypsy. So, yes, around 1,500 years ago, the Romani people, often referred to as gypsies, began a long migration from what is now northwest India. And over generations, they passed through Central Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, and finally into Europe. And by the 15th century, they had arrived in Spain. But instead of finding freedom, they faced suspicion, rejection, and persecution. And this was also a time when Spain was under the control of the Catholic monarchs, and minority groups like the Moors, the Jews, and the Romani were all targeted by harsh laws during the Inquisition. Many were forced to convert, go into hiding, or flee. And in these difficult conditions, a new kind of expression began to take shape. People sang about sorrow, loss, and displacement, but they also sang about joy, family, and the need to survive. And these songs were not written down, they were passed from one voice to another, carrying generations of feeling in each note. And because the people singing them came from different backgrounds, flamenco grew as a fusion of many influences. And I guess that is also why it is so difficult to pin down exactly where it came from, because it's such an amalgamation of cultures and people and areas all over the world. You can hear the rhythms of North Africa, the poetry of Arabic music, the chants of Jewish traditions, and the storytelling of the Romani culture. And they all played a part. Even the word flamenco is a bit of a mystery. One theory says it comes from the Arabic fela mengu, meaning wandering peasant, which I guess is a fitting name for a people that's always on the move. Others think that it was a nickname for bold, flashy behavior, or that it referred to the bird, the flamingo, whose proud stance reminded people of the dramatic dance style. I don't know if I really agree with that because this flamenco flamingo thing is also something that we have to explain away to this day. Oh, so you dance flamingo. Mm, not so much. So, whatever the origin of the word, flamenco became something real and meaningful to those who lived it. It's really not just a dance, it's about living flamenco. It wasn't about performance in the early days, it was really about expression, which is still important today as much as ever, although I think maybe in those times it had even more meaning. It really helped people to survive emotionally and spiritually during times of pain and pressure. While flamenco is definitely Spanish, it's also the result of many cultures coming together. It's a musical memory of migration, of hardship and resilience. And I guess that is where its power begins. If flamenco is the soul, then Andalusia is the body that gave it shape. Most of you will know that Andalusia is located in southern Spain, and it's a beautiful region filled with sun-baked plains, rolling hills, whitewashed towns, and winding alleyways that seem to hold centuries of secrets. It's a place with a long history of cultural exchange, and flamenco is one of its most powerful creations. Andalusia is made up of 8 provinces. There's Huelva, Seville, Cadiz, Malaga, Cordoba, Granada, Jaén, and Almería. And flamenco's heartbeat can really be felt in all of them, but 2 cities in particular played a leading role, which is Jerez de la Frontera and Seville. Jerez is often called the cradle of flamenco because this city, which is located in the province of Cadiz, is known for its deep singing traditions. In neighborhoods like Santiago and San Miguel, flamenco grew out of tight-knit communities where people sang and danced at family gatherings, in courtyards, and even in the street. There's a raw, earthy quality to the flamenco that comes from Jerez. It's emotional and grounded and really full of soul. And it is a place that I long to visit someday, maybe one day, who knows. And just down the road or up the road from there is Seville, which is another flamenco powerhouse. And I was very privileged to visit Seville quite a few years ago, but a beautiful, beautiful town. And in the Triana neighborhood, flamenco developed with a slightly different flavor to that of Jerez. More theatrical and expressive, apparently, but still deeply rooted in tradition. And Seville also played an important part in bringing flamenco from the streets to the stage. And across the rest of Andalusia, flamenco evolved into a patchwork of local styles because You had in Huelva, for example, over 30 variations of the fandango. And in Malaga and Granada, you'll find dances and songs that reflect more the region's Moorish past. Even in Granada, for example, if you walk through the streets, you get the smells of the, like the teas and the incense and all those types of smells also hang in the air. It's definitely a very strong Moorish influence there. And in Cordoba, for example, flamenco again is known for its poetic and elegant style. Even though there's differences, what all these places share is a deep connection to the land, to the people who live there, and they love flamenco, and flamenco grew out of daily life. And what I love about flamenco so much, I guess, also is that the intention of it was also never that it must be polished or perfect. It was meant to be real. You are not going to get any dance form I might get chastised for this, but I do feel that you're not going to get any dance form that's as real as flamenco. And that is why Andalusia isn't just a backdrop for flamenco. It's really the reason that flamenco exists at all. The rhythms of this region, the heat of the air, the sound of people talking in the street, it's all woven into the music. I think the heartbeat of Andalusia is flamenco. The heart beats in flamenco compass. So really what it comes down to is that flamenco is about emotion, raw lived feeling, whatever you're feeling in the moment. So how you are going to dance in Alegrias today is not how you're going to dance it tomorrow if you are really feeling what you are doing, for example. Flamenco doesn't just express feelings, it releases them. And for many of the people who shaped flamenco, music was their lifeline. The Romani, the Moors, the Sephardic Jews, all were marginalized, persecuted, or pushed to the edges of society. I mean, during the Spanish Inquisition, laws targeted these groups, banning cultural practices and forcing conversions, and yet, in secret, these communities kept their traditions alive and they kept dancing flamenco. Flamenco became a kind of emotional language, a way to survive what couldn't be said out loud. They sometimes even used it to protest. And the cante, or song, was the soul of that expression. It wasn't always dancing. The cante wasn't polished or formal. It was rough around the edges, often just passed down by ear, probably changed as it was passed down to their generations, and just filled with personal pain and longing. And you can really hear it in the tone. Flamenco singers don't just sing, they cry out. Their voices break, it stretches, and it releases. It's honest, you know? For the communities that lived through oppression, flamenco really became a kind of resistance, a way to keep their identity intact, a way to feel human, even in the face of suffering. And over time, that raw emotional honesty became something that people all over the world could connect with and that they resonated with. And that is probably also why I decided to still do this episode, because while flamenco comes from a very specific place and time, I think its core emotions are universal, because everyone, even though at different levels, knows what it's like to feel heartbreak, to long for something, to fight for joy, to never know if there's going to be an end to suffering that you are going through, or sadness that you are living. Flamenco gives those feelings a voice. And once you've heard it, really heard it, it's hard to forget. Without just talking about the emotional side of it, I just want to touch on flamenco's golden age. For much of its early life, flamenco lived in small spaces, in family homes, courtyards, and local gatherings. But in the mid 1800s, things began to change. This period is often called flamenco's golden age because it's when flamenco stepped into the public eye and it began to be performed professionally in venues known as café cantantes, or what we will know as flamenco cafes. And these places popped up in cities like Seville, Cadiz, and Madrid, offering food, drink, and live flamenco shows. And for the first time, flamenco artists could make a living from their craft. Singers and dancers and guitarists became stars in their own right. Styles became more defined and performances more polished. And the art form gained structure without losing its emotional heart. And in the 20th century, flamenco moved into the tablao, something that is now more familiar to us. Tablao is a dedicated flamenco venue with a stage, with lights, and a more theatrical setup. And in tablaos, performances were often geared towards tourists or larger audiences, especially as Spain began to promote flamenco as part of its national identity. Unfortunately, this rise in popularity brought mixed feelings. On one hand, flamenco was finally being recognized and celebrated, and on the other hand, some felt that the real origin of flamenco wasn't being lived anymore, that the spontaneity and the intimacy of earlier flamenco was lost. And the performances became more standardized and not as raw and unfiltered as within family gatherings. It became more of a stage act. Still, many artists managed to keep the soul of flamenco alive. They used the stage not just to entertain, but to express something real. And when you experience the dance of a flamenco dancer or a singer that really feels what they are doing in the moment, that is really something spectacular and very special to experience. These are the performers that really help to let flamenco evolve, to bring modernity, I don't know how you pronounce it, but also sticking to the traditions. During this time, it really set the stage for flamenco to evolve to where it would not only thrive in Spain, but also in the rest of the world. As the 20th century rolled on, flamenco didn't stay in Spain. It began to travel, like the Romani traveled from all over the world into Spain. Flamenco then started traveling from Spain to the rest of the world again. It began across Europe, firstly, and then onto the Americas, and eventually to nearly every corner of the world. I think, what is it called? Ida y Vuelta, flamenco Ida y Vuelta. So when performers went to other countries and then they brought some of those dance traditions back with them and helped flamenco evolve even further. Like, for example, the Guajira, which is a very feminine fan dance that actually originated in Cuba. So we will still eventually do, hopefully, an episode on that. I'm not going to get into different colors. But yeah, ida y vuelta. So flamenco went into the world, and then the world again was brought back with flamenco to Spain. What I do find interesting also is that flamenco resonated deeply even with people that are so far from its original roots. In Japan, for example, there's a passionate flamenco scene with dedicated dancers and schools. The same is true in places like the United States, Mexico, Argentina, even in India, here in South Africa. I know there's some schools in Australia, there's all over Europe, in Italy, in France, in Netherlands. So, yeah, that's amazing that it actually went back all over the world. And as it spread and, Ida y Vuelta happened, flamenco also began to fuse with other musical styles like jazz, classical, and blues, all kinds of rhythms. And you can look at artists like Paco de Lucia and Camarón de la Isla that helped to lead this wave of experimentation, proving that flamenco could grow without losing its soul. We've also touched on this before, but in 2010, flamenco was officially recognized by UNESCO as part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. It was a huge moment for flamenco, an acknowledgement that it's not just a Spanish tradition, but it's a global cultural treasure. And today, flamenco continues to evolve. I'm a bit of a traditionalist, so I like to stick to more, traditional ways. You really get some interesting interpretations of flamenco where new generations of artists are exploring fresh sounds and styles. Some still honoring the tradition that came before them, and others really pushing the boundaries. But I'll leave it to you to go and explore and decide for yourself. Thanks to flamenco's honesty and emotional power, it keeps finding new audiences because its story at its core is a human one. I'll ask you a rhetorical question. Why do you think that flamenco endures? With all the changes flamenco has gone through over the years or the centuries, you might wonder what's kept it alive. What would you think? I think it's the realness, because the emotions of it really speaks to something very deep within us. And emotions and feeling never goes out of style. I think people connect with flamenco not just because it's beautiful or technically impressive, because it is, but because it feels honest. It doesn't shy away from the difficult things or the, so to speak, ugly things like pain and longing and heartbreak. It really embraces it and builds on it. And it also makes room for joy, resilience, celebration, cheekiness, playfulness, community. In a way, I think flamenco mirrors life. It's full of contrast, and it allows us to feel all of it. That's why I think flamenco endures. We might not know the exact origin of it, but the spirit of flamenco is timeless, and that is what keeps it moving and surviving generation after generation. That is the end of episode 55. We made it through the complicated journey of flamenco, although it was only scratching the surface. But thank you so much for tolerating me with this episode. But at least now you, as well as I, know a little bit more of where flamenco came from, how it grew, and why it still moves people all around the world. But more than anything, I hope you've come away with a deeper sense of what flamenco really is, if you are not already completely and utterly in love with it as I am. Yeah, a deeper feeling of what it is. It's not just music or dancing or singing, but it's really a way of feeling, expressing, connecting, and I think also surviving. Flamenco reminds us that beauty can come from struggle, that emotion has power, and that art can carry the weight of history while still speaking to the present. So, whether you're listening to a flamenco singer, watching a dancer's feet fly across the floor, or just stand there with power and silence, or if you hear a guitarist pour their soul into a single note, I hope you will feel it as much as they do and that you'll hear the story behind it. So until next time, when we talk about, I don't know what we're going to talk about, until we connect with each other again, keep your heart open and maybe let a little flamenco into your life. So I will chat to you in the next one. Ole!